All right, everyone. This is another episode of All My Friends Need Therapy. And I'm here with Alex Ward, an old good friend of mine. If you want to just introduce yourself to everyone and kind of let everyone know who you are, what you do.
Hi, I'm Alex. I am an actor. I live in Los Angeles, and I'm also a mom and an old friend of Danny's.
So we kind of may have crossed paths before high school within like the context of like the Queens like public school scene of like YMCA dances maybe or something of that nature. But it wasn't until high school, obviously, that we really kind of knew each other and we went to a very odd new high school, right? We went to the
Yeah,
Frank Sinatra School of the Arts. Um, and you were a what major?
drama
You were a
major,
drama major, yeah. I was a vocal major, and we were also part of the first graduating class,
which makes
or
everyone
full.
really, really close too. We were also there the year the school opened, so you're so tight with everyone because it was such a small group of kids.
Yeah, I want to. I can't remember off the top of my head like what the actual number was for like our full group, but yeah, it really was that like tight knit feeling of we're all in this new thing together. Plus, it
But
was super.
they had no idea what they were doing. I think there was 165 of us, but like 330 of the, like total in the school. But I feel like our graduating class was like 160, which in Queens is unheard of. It's like 3,000
Right,
normally.
yeah, like if we look at like all of the high schools in our local areas, like if you look like a St. Francis Prep or something like that, their graduating classes are tremendous. Um, but like, so we were the first classes in there, and no one knew what they were doing, like you said. What was your audition process like? Because mine was ridiculous, so I'm wondering what the drama audition process was like.
It was pretty standard, and when you audition for high schools and you're doing multiple of them, they kind of pretty much hopefully ask for the same thing. So I'd already been auditioning for LaGuardia, PPAS, all the other ones. And it was two contrasting monologues. And I remember that, like my one for Frank Sinatra, it was just Miss Miller in the room. And I remember that being like my best. I was like, if I don't get into this school, there's like no just like I've never. That was the first time. I think I was 13 years old when I auditioned for Frank Sinatra, and I was
Mhm,
like, killed it. And I normally never felt like that. I was very self-deprecating at that age. Sometimes still am. So I
mhm.
remember feeling like it was very normal. She didn't say anything, and I left there being like, yes.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because the vocal majors, or at least the first block of auditions, there was no set teachers. I don't believe that like Miss Best was even really like hired at all yet. And there were like a bunch of other like admin people that were in the room. And we had
Wow.
to sing Happy Birthday to Frank and like tap out rhythms. And all the other auditions that I was going on, like you said, LaGuardia, all those places, you had to have things prepared. You had to go in there super pro, and going into there and being like, can you sing Happy Birthday? I was like, what? Is that for real? And then like you get in and you don't know what to expect. And I think one of the most unique things about, you know, our first year there was the first like week of us being there, it was 9/11, which was like insanity being right across the river from the whole thing.
You could see it from a bathroom. It
Yeah.
was really, really, really intense. And some people that went to our schools, their parents worked in the buildings. I think
Yeah.
ultimately, I could correct me. I'm so sorry if I'm wrong, but I think everyone ended up being okay. But I remember those students getting pulled out to speak to, and that was a really crazy day. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, that was a wild time, and it's like one of those things that like I always like forget about, and how that was like so much part of the like experience there, because like instantly after that, like so many of the groups there were like thrust into like performing for like a firehouse or doing monologues maybe based on something like that?
I my experience in the drama program there the first year was awful. I look back, it was horrible. And I look back and I'm like, now that I've trained in lots of other places and I see children, which is what I was, what we were, and just Miss Miller had never taught acting before. And like she was doing like I don't know if it was like some social experiment, but we never acted
Mm,
the whole year. It was like we had to learn about ice cubes melting into the whole of its parts and like uh it was a lot. So we were doing heavy material once Frisch came into the picture,
right,
and then it was like, please slit your own throat and bleed all over your childhood trauma, which is not how you teach children or adults
right.
to act. You it has nothing. No, I'm so against it. um so once he came in the picture, we were doing very 9/11 heavy things and stuff like that. But Miss Miller, please, it was like I don't even know. It was torturous and really upsetting on a crazy year. Like it was my dream to go to this school. And I'm like, what are we doing? I just want to act. And she's like, you're doing it wrong. I'm like, we're not even doing anything. So how am I doing it wrong? You know, I ended up loving her at the end, but I don't know if that was honestly, a social experiment. It was crazy.
Do you feel like the loving her at the end? Because like I remember having like similar experiences with like maybe not like my main vocal teacher, right? Like Miss Best, but like um, Mr. Sandry, and other people that then were involved more on like the musical theater aspect of it. Do you feel like when you were able to kind of like be like, oh, I kind of like her, was that more of you feeling like you were more confident in yourself and your ability and kind of creating this identity towards the end?
Yes and no. I really think that I went in there like I was very much the Leah Michelle of my class, which I mean, very annoying and very like, you're gonna miss rehearsal to go hang out with a boy? I will be there at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then
Mm,
I was very serious. And I think Miss Miller, that situation, she ended up changing. Where I'm like, it was like one day she was like, "Psych, now we're acting, and I'm nice." Like, I really don't. I obviously think that I did a lot of internal growth in high school internally, but I feel like she taught me a really big lesson because I've encountered a lot of acting teachers, teachers in general, and people in power just like her towards me
mm,
in my life, and I feel like now there's directors or casting directors or agents that are notorious for hating everyone. Those have become like I once by the time I got to college, I went to a conservatory style college as well. The teachers that everyone was afraid of, I was like their pet. I
mm.
It taught me how like people who hate the world end up loving me, and the people who only hate a couple people, like I could never win them over. But like she taught me how to soften and connect with people who are obviously really angry, and it has nothing to do with me. And I feel like she gave me a gift in that. Wouldn't do it over again, but I'm glad that.
Right. Yeah. Like that's something I always kind of struggle with now that I've become more like involved in like mental health for others, but also in my own mental health. Like I always think about like if I could go back and like talk to that person, to me, then what would I what would I say to that person? And like how would I help them through all of like the things that went on at such that young age where we're all like trying to figure out everything. Like for me, it was the first time I ever went like on a train and a bus by myself and like had all of this just like extra time to just like do the right thing, do the wrong thing, do all the stuff in between. Um, and part of me was like, oh, I would do it over again. And then like as you're saying that, I'm thinking about it, going like, I don't know if I'd want to do it over again. Like I don't know if I'd want to like sit in those rooms and feel the way I felt sometimes in those places. Like high school for me sometimes was like feeling very inadequate a lot of the times, whether it was vocally whether it was academically, um, and even when I went off to college, I felt the same way. But yeah, so like yeah, I don't. I think the people there were there for that reason at that time, and it helped kind of make us able to kind of be like, huh, I know you, I know your type, and here's how I'm going to deal with it now that I'm older.
I think that's interesting, and like I wouldn't do it over again. I think it all happened how it was supposed to. And but what I would tell myself then is probably what I'm going to wish I told myself right now when I'm 60, which is, oh, baby girl, do not even, this is hysterical. Like, you're
Yeah.
going to take this serious. Like, you have no idea how much good is. I think I spent so much time. That's where my worrying started.
Mm.
And it was like, I feel like I am adequate. Why isn't this work? Why is this so unjust? Why is this so rigged, against me? Why are they getting that opportunity when I worked out? Like, I was so, everything was about justice for me and like worrying, will I ever get what I deserve? And it very entitled, but also for very insecure as well at the same time. And I just feel like it was a lot of, not so much that I felt inadequate, I just felt worried that it would never come together. And I just wish that I would have been like, oh my God, this is like gravy compared to life has not begun to fuck you yet, but also like,
Yeah.
but you have so much more horrible things to learn, but also like this won't even matter. It won't even matter.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that is just the culture that surrounds like art schools and conservatories and things like that, where there is so much, I don't know if competition, like maybe I think college years, there's more, like I never felt necessarily like in a lot of like that it was like this dog eat dog world.
Mm-hmm.
But and that might be because you're in a chorus and a chorus goes and sings together, and it's not that you're trying to get that one part that has one person that is going to be that part. Um, but like, I wonder how much of that is the culture that does begin that worry and that like that anxiety at a young age where you're constantly like, I have to do this or I have to be this, otherwise I'm not going to get this or do this, or and how much that sets us up for adulthood if you're still in the arts, right? Like you've gone on to be in the entertainment industry. I went on to be in a touring band, and there was so much anxiety going into that where it was like, I only know this and this is my next experience. Holy crap, what am I doing?
I'm in the same experience. I mean, it just
Yeah.
on a way bigger level. I would like to note that I loved my high school experience.
Right.
It was one of the most, I think if I didn't, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't go through there. And there were times, after that first year, which makes it sound like all 4 years were like that. But once we were allowed to do what I signed up to do, I felt, like I was where I was supposed to be. And I learned a lot, and I like learned how to believe in myself. And I think
Right.
that was a huge thing. And I just felt like I've never laughed like like I did in high school. Like especially with all the drama people, my God, I just feel like there's a little part of me in that building with everybody else. And it feels really special. I know a lot of people didn't have high school experiences like that, so I'm really grateful for it. But I mean, I went on to conservatory, and then I got my first professional job at 19 where I toured doing a play. Then I went to England for a few months to do a play, a big play over there. And then I moved to LA, and it was some of my biggest stuff are right when I first moved here. And I feel like I have never gotten out of I need to be a little more like this so I can get into that office. Or I didn't get the job because that's their nephew or niece or I've just had to learn how to it doesn't matter if they're looking for Lucky Charms and I'm Cheerios. I'm never going to be Lucky Charms. But if I serve them Cheerios, that's perfected because I've been myself this whole time. And this is how you got to eat it with milk and then a little bit, like, just taste it how I know that I'm, instead of me being like, oh, if I add sugar to Cheerios, maybe I'll mimic Lucky Charms. I'll get this one job. And I feel like if your Cheerios, perfect that and serve it to them every time. And if they don't want it, they don't want it. And I think for a long time, not recently, but early on, I'm like, okay, if I get this much like this, then I'll get that. And it doesn't, that catches up to you fast in so many arenas.
Right. Yeah. I feel like hearing you say that, like, learning how to become like your authentic self is one of those things where do you feel that is something that keeps you grounded in a lot of moments when it does get tough, where you're like, I didn't get that, but at least I was myself and I was true to who I set out to be?
I wish I could. That's such a good question. I don't know what keeps me grounded because it's not that. It's
Right.
very much like sometimes being your authentic self. It's scary, but that's also like, wow, they authentically hate me. I wasn't
Right.
trying to be anything else. Sometimes a lot of people sabotage where they were like, I didn't get it because I was trying to do the damn accent and if I just had a little bit more time with the material. But when you're like, no, I gave them my heart and they were like, now next. And it's like, that can suck, but I have no idea what makes it better at the end of the day. It hurts just as bad as the first rejection that you get. You just recover. It just happens so much on a daily basis, on a weekly basis I'm in my 30s now, and I'm still daily, weekly, if not daily, receiving no thanks. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's a yes, and I definitely don't fall apart like I used to. But sometimes when it's like a big, big thing and you're like, this is it. This is what all the bullshit was leading me to. And like, this was written for me and I made it to the end and this is the day. And then it's not, you're like, what was it all for? Like, I just don't have an answer for how I recover quickly now. I just do.
Right. And I think sometimes it probably just is so a part of your fabric, right? Like it's so a part of like, if I take the time to fall apart or I take the time to do this, it doesn't get me to the next one. It just slows the process down. And the chance that I might have for the next one might be not there anymore because it is a fast paced here today, gone tomorrow business.
I think too, when I've produced a few things, which isn't my favorite thing to do, but I'm really proud of the projects that I've made that have done really well. Or when a friend has asked me to sit in on a casting session for their projects, and I watch everyone come in, 30, 40 people, every single person out here hits it out of the park, where I'm like, oh my God, that was the best audition I've ever seen. I wish we could cast them. We can't. And you always hear people's casting directors on, Instagram Live or TV saying like, it's not, we want you to get the job and we think you're wonderful. I'm like, yeah. That's just what people say. But of the few times I've been on the other end of the table, which is rare, but I have been there, where I'm like, literally, this was the best actor I have ever seen, but it was just not possible to give them the part. They were so wrong. I need somebody 6'2" with red hair, otherwise it's not going to make sense.
Right.
And so I think that I had to stop attaching my, getting validation and attaching my worth, whether there's somebody who's making, their living telling people yes and no, like giving them so much power over if I'm worth it or not. Right. And I think even the good ones, just because I got the job, that doesn't mean I'm any better than anybody else.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very, very good way of looking at that. So if we go back a little bit, talking about getting kind of like your first kind of job, you said right out of college. So right out of college, and then shortly after that, you moved out to LA.
Yeah.
what was that like going from, you know, living in the city, living in New York, right?
And
Then
I
going out,
was living in the city. I was living.
right. So then going out to LA, which is a totally different vibe altogether.
It was crazy. And it's like, I'm not the most spiritual person, but I remember being really unhappy living in Manhattan. I was living in my dream apartment on 45th Street in Hell's Kitchen. I've wanted to
Right.
live in that area since I was 5 years old. And I was making great money at the time. And, I was like going to Broadway shows by myself because I could walk there, and taking myself out to dinners, and just like living the life I thought everybody wanted. And I was really sad because like auditions weren't coming in. I had no creative outlet, and I didn't know that that's why I was so sad, but I was really sad. And I remember a friend of mine who lived out here, then came to New York because he was on a show for a while, and he became friends with my girl group, and it was so fun to see him all the time. And I still to this day really look up to him as an actor. I think he's wonderful, and was a working actor, and that's what I wanted to be. And I remember one night, it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were all at a bar, and I didn't drink that night. I get over it sometimes. And I remember him leaning over and saying, "So when are you going to move to LA?" And I laughed. I don't have a driver's license. I still don't have a driver's license, but that's a whole other conversation. I'm like, I'm not going out there. Who would ever? I don't have a driver's license because who would ever leave New York City? It's the best city in the world. So I thought. And he says, everybody, I'll never forget this. He said, everybody who wants to work as an actor knows that they'll end up there. And it felt like I got punched in the face, because my whole body was like, oh my God, I do know that. I do know that. Whether it's the truth or not, it was my truth. Mm-hmm. And so I got like a spam email the next morning. I was still thinking about it after going to sleep, and it was like, oh, take our workshop and we're all going to LA. If you make it, we're taking 16 actors, whatever. We're going to LA for a week. And I was like, oh, that's funny. I'll go to this thing and I'll audition. There were 600 people there. I was like, if I get it, I think it was maybe 19 people they were taking, then I'll go, but I'm not going to get it. So I got it. And I was off to LA within a week. And when I landed for the workshop, because I had planned to stay there for the workshop for the week and then go hang out with friends after, just to see if I liked it. When I landed at LAX, I cried and cried because I was like, oh my God, I'm moving here fast. I just knew it. I was like, and I'm not ready. But it really felt like one of the only times in my life where I was just like, I'm putting on a coat, I'm going to the airport. I don't know why. I felt like something was just dragging me here. And I was, by that September, which, I mean, maybe 5 weeks later, I was living here. It was an adjustment. It was really slow here compared to New York. I love to rush. Everything takes so much time here. But what I didn't realize is like I needed to slow down. And this was the place for me to be. But it was very cosmic, very fast. And then I got here and was like, oh my God, I felt like I exhaled for the first time in my life.
Yeah, I like the way you put that, like exhaling for the first time in your life. And also like sometimes going with those things that pull us and we don't know why it's pulling us are so important, right? Because they end up sometimes becoming the best things in our lives.
100%.
For myself, anything that I've ever done has been like this weird, like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try it. Like when I went and joined this band, I went with like a binder full of like their lyric sheets in protectors, because that's what I knew, because I was this theater like kid and sang opera songs and went there, and never driven out of New York ever in my life. Drove to New Jersey by myself, lied to my parents, but I felt like that pull, that like something is right here. Just go do it. And even after that, when it broke up and I went and did something else, it was like, just go do that. just figure it out. And even now in my life at 34 years old, it's like there are things that have been pulling me, and like people, like my family always kind of says, like you switch, like you get this motivation to go do something else or do something, and you go and follow it. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And obviously for you, it's worked out because you've been in LA now for how long?
12 years.
Yeah, you've been in LA for 12 years. You've been actively working, and actively like doing a lot of great things. One thing I'm curious about is when something like a global pandemic hits, what happens to someone who is in your industry?
The pandemic was really crazy. My husband's in the industry as well.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be extremely sensitive and careful how I word this because I don't need this biting me in the you-know-what later. But I think we were at a point, I know the pandemic was no joke. A lot of people died. We took the lockdown I still have never been with my kid somewhere without a mask. She plays on the playground, mask. Like I take the whole thing. She's never played with another child that I don't know has just been tested without a mask, and we're 3 years in. Like I do not play games with COVID. Whatever. So we like were locked down, not even seeing my parents-in-law, not even seeing anybody for a long time. I think my husband and I were both at a point in our careers where like, I think we needed everything to shut down for a second to really reassess what we were doing. Everything was just, there was so much going on, and I think we needed that pause. And from the pandemic, you know, his career has never been better. He's producing network TV and he's an actor too, but like found this path in producing where we lived in New York City for 5 months last year. I got to finally see my family. That was always my dream. Like, I wish we could get paid to go see my family for months.
Right.
And then, yeah, for me, auditions shut down. Our health insurance, SAG did us so dirty. That's a whole other thing. It was crazy what was happening. So I was like, I need a way to make money and not get sick. And, you know, there's no auditions. Everything is shut down. And so I got into voiceover during the pandemic. I have experience. Like I wasn't like, I'm going to learn about voice acting. I've done a few jobs. Like I worked for Will Smith's company back in 2013, where every movie his production company did that year, I played every female voice in pre-production, where the director, they have these things called animatics where they make moving storyboards of the entire movie before they film it. So they show everyone, this is what it's going to look like, especially for big budget things. So the camera's going to come here, they're going to zoom in here, the actors walk this way, and they have a drawing that moves. So I am the dialogue on top of it. So like I did it for the movie Annie with like Cameron Diaz playing Hannigan, which whatever, but like I played all the orphans, everybody beforehand. And so I remember really loving it, but not knowing how to jump into it. So with all the time from the pandemic, I did a bunch of research, and the pandemic gave me, like, I am a full-time actor. That is all I do. It gave me the opportunity. Like I'm open to having a side hustle if I need it, but like my side hustle is full-time actor. Like I am now doing voiceover every single day for the last, I don't know, like 19 or 20 months. And I work out of my house so I can be with my kid.
And you have a show coming out, right?
I do. I have a couple things coming out. I have it's a scripted podcast Eva Longoria is doing. The cast is, no offense, I know it's like the most star-studded cast that I've ever worked with. They're so like people, because it's anyone in the Latino community I've looked up to. We don't get a lot of airtime, so like I really watch my Latinx people, and I'm like, oh my God, they're doing it, and they've been doing it. Like this cast is so good, but it's about a true story about the history of the Dominican Republic. I'm one of two people who isn't Dominican. Obviously, I'm Puerto Rican. I'm still, I'm not, you know, it's close. Not that it's close, but you know what I mean? I think one girl's Mexican and I'm Puerto Rican. Everyone else is authentic Dominican, which they really wanted. and it's about the crushing story of like what their dictator did to their country that like they did not teach us in art school. And so that's coming out August 30th, some like end of August, which I'm really excited. But I'm still definitely auditioning. Everything is self-tape now, so I can travel. My agent will send a thing, I'll do a tape, I get it or I don't. But I'm able to sustain myself working from home, so I've never left my kid with anybody other than my husband, and I'm able to work and watch her at the same time, which that's all I've ever really wanted. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny that you say it. Like my experience and my, obviously I'm out of the entertainment industry, so it's a very far away thing for me, but I'm the exact same way. So it's my daughter is in a mask everywhere she goes. Still to this day, she goes to a completely outdoor camp, and she's one of the only little kids in a mask because we're just like we don't know anything.
It's not worth it. It's not, and it's not that big a deal. Like that's what I mean. This is our opinion, but still.
Right. And my whole thing is I always say like we've made it this far. So we're like I know a lot of people who have gotten COVID, and we're almost 3 years in, and my family has not gotten it, not ever anything like that. Cause like I'm like I'll still double mask, like I'll still do all sorts of stuff. And I'm very like calculated. Like if I have to go in somewhere, I like map it out like I'm in a video game. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go here first, then I'm going to hang a right here, then I'm going to do this.
Everyone makes fun of me. My friends make fun. I'm like, I don't care. I literally don't care. There's no one you can interview from the last pandemic. Like, how'd it work out? Was it totally fine? And just like, you don't know. You don't know.
Yeah, there's so many things that we don't know. And I like what you said, that it was a chance for you to kind of, although it was such a terrible thing, right? Like it was a horrible thing. And we're like cocky Americans who are like, this will never happen to us. I never thought in my lifetime that I'd see something like that I heard about from my grandparents or my great grandparents, that they went through, these things before other things were available. But, that ability to slow down and get what you want, like being at home with your daughter, similar to my family as well, getting to spend the time through these like really great years. How old's your daughter?
She's 3.
So like, yeah, those like first 3 years, 4 years, where a lot of times they're in a daycare, they're with an in-law or a parent. You're getting to experience that all like full force. What has that been like? What like for you to be able to experience that, like you and your husband, to be able to be there and see that, when a lot of your peers, if they have kids, maybe don't have that.
My husband and I talk about this almost every day. Just the gratitude for that time. She was only 7 months old when the pandemic hit, and now she's 3. That's crazy. And he's like, oh my God, every time she does something cool, he's like, I would have missed this. I would have missed this. And, totally. He works his ass off to make sure that we are okay. And like, I had just had a baby, like how much am I going to be able to do? And I was still taking little things here and there to like work. LA is so expensive. And we talk about it on the daily, how incredible it is, because like I didn't have both my parents. My parents were divorced, which it is not sad. I think I'm so lucky to like normalize loving having parents and step-parents. My step-parents have been with me my whole life. I've had 4 parents my whole life. I think it's incredible. I have, name a problem, I have one person who's an expert at handling it, and like love that for me. But like my mom had to work, and my dad didn't live with my mom. And so it was like, I didn't have that. And my husband is one of 4 kids. He's the youngest. He's like, and his parents had to work really hard too. And it's like, I see my friends who unfortunately don't have the, luxury to stay home, or like haven't yet found a stay-at-home job that works for them. Like I feel for them, because I see the difference in my daughter at 3 years old, at 2 years old, at 1 year old. I just see what it's done for her to have two people, her mom and her dad, home, who put her first. And I mean, she has our full attention 24 hours a day for the most crucial years of her life. And we practice gentle parenting and really love to teach her stuff. And we take her into nature and we do all the things. Like, we really, really, it was so important for us to give her all the things that she would need from an emotional level. You know what I mean? Like, she needs to feel secure and safe. And we don't, practice a lot of things that were really hot in the 80s when we were babies to do. No disrespect to all of our parents. They did the best job with what but like, they would tell on, in the baby books, it would be like, lock them in the room at, 11 months old, turn off the lights, and they'll, figure it out. And it's like, they're not going to figure it out. They know you're not coming for them is what it is. And that's I feel like I don't know there's a time that I didn't have anxiety my whole life. But if you look at the style of parenting, which is what they were encouraged to do, and we're doing the opposite and are home to like facilitate the kind of parenting we want to do, I just see how like free and happy she is. And it is the biggest gift of a horrible, horrible pandemic. I wouldn't want to miss any of it.
Yeah, it's totally been, as bad as it was and still is. It's one of the things in my experience of it. It's taken away a lot, but not taken away like other people, right? Like, it didn't affect me the way it's affected so many people, where they've been dealt, horrible, horrible things. But it's also given that sense of like being able to be present and intentional, and like you said, work on those things that we want to be different for our kids, that maybe were a little different for us, and like you said, it's not a knock towards our parents, because our parents will be the first ones to tell anyone, we want you to do better than we did. That's the whole point, right? Like, I want my daughter, when she grows up and she becomes, a mother if she wants, I want her to have her things that she does. And she goes, when my dad used to do this, I couldn't stand that. I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to take this differently. Like, I want her to have that, that empowerment to do so. And it's so important. And like you said, like your husband saying, I would have missed that. Like, first steps, first word, things like that, where so many people miss those things because they're at work or they're doing something else, to where it's like you're spending that time and you get to really, really like enjoy this thing, right? Like that. You're like,
make the most of this crazy lockdown that we stayed in for a lot longer than we were instructed to.
Yeah, like my backyard slowly became like an amusement park for a child, where it was like, oh, this big swing set, oh, this trampoline, this pool, this this playhouse, this thing, that thing, where we were like, well, we can't go here, but we're going to make our backyard the coolest place to be, so that you never feel like you're missing out. She was lucky enough to where she had like an older cousin, and we were all like in this like pod of like, no one goes anywhere, and we're the only people that like you see. And if you jump outside of that, sorry, 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, we'll see you again.
Yep.
And even like you said, you really didn't see anyone. My parents, like for the first, like, I think like 6 months, we didn't see each other. And then it was like, if you're willing to do this,
then you can come to the house.
Then you can do this. And I mean, and bless their hearts, like they've sacrificed a lot under my guidance, right? Like under my, like, if you would like to see your granddaughter, this is how your poor life needs to be. But you slowly learn their level of love for your child, and their willingness to be like, I don't care about going to this restaurant. I care about spending 3 days in Massachusetts with my granddaughter. That's what I care about. So
Same exact thing.
yeah,
It's because while it's beautiful to be able to see all those milestones, how old's your daughter now?
she just turned 5.
5? Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
But
she's like a little adult.
they I believe that all of a sudden overnight I'm like, who, that's a lot of talking about, where'd you learn those big words?
Yeah,
But it's not easy to be home and not do things. Like, yes, it's beautiful to be able to, like, that's making the most out of, we don't want to be in a pandemic and locked
right.
in and whatever, but a lot of like extended family or friends are like, I'm not gonna not do that. And it's like, cool, then you can't get mad when
Right.
we don't want to chill, you know?
Yeah, that's one of the bigger things. Not so much for me, but I think my family, right? Like that thought of like not being able to do all those things, and then having to be comfortable with the fact of like, I'm not doing it, and I don't care. You go do what you do, and I'll do what I'm doing, and that's okay. Like,
But then if they're upset, it's like, no, I'm okay with like that this sucks. You're the one getting mad, but then just stay inside and then we don't have to do it. Like, I'm not mad that you want to go do those things. Like, please
right.
have at it.
It's a
Like,
choice. Like it's a choice. Like we I always tell people, like, if you need to go do this, go do it, because that's what you need to do. But I'll see you in 2 weeks. I'll see you in 3 weeks.
100%.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things. And, you know, working now in mental health, um, it's kind of also opens your eyes to trying to make sure that like you're you're taking care of yourself and your own mind, and doing the things that are right for yourself and your family, regardless of a friend or a family member, what they might be doing. And you're only taking care of what you can control. And I always say I care about the square footage of my house and what's inside of it, and whoever is allowed to come inside of it. Everything else I can't control. um and that's really how we have to, like, I think that's a good way to live live life in general.
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about, because we only hear about it when it's a big deal. What is your opinion on the crossover between maybe your experience in the entertainment industry, or entertainment industry in general, and mental health? And where are people taken care of? Is there access? Is there promotion of it? Or is it kind of like, we're going to chew you up, spit you out, and whatever happens, happens?
Oof. I mean, I think that we always hear of like, oh, the strides that we're making to make sure that these things are in place so certain things don't happen again to cause traumatic things. There's certain
Mm-hmm.
things in place to protect actors and um and crew. But I feel like we have, like, that's all nice to like pretend, like we have a long, long way to go. That's just like from there. I mean, there's a thousand things. Being in the entertainment industry it can be so hard on your mental health. There really isn't anything that is provided to you other than being in a community of like-minded people, or
Mm-hmm.
living an examined life, whether that's therapy or whatever it is you do. You're like on your own to make sure that it doesn't get to you, because there are, like, name an aspect of life and it's as it relates to entertainment industry, and there's this many disorders and things that are going on. You know what I mean? It's, you're
Right.
very much responsible for yourself. That being said, I think that I love that, the union has rules about how much I can work, so that I'm not burning myself out. You're not allowed to report to set after they send you home. Like there's things like that, but like people who work in crew, they don't have rules like that. There was like a huge strike, things like that, where they're like so overworked, so tired, so underappreciated that they're like driving home to drive back to set 30 minutes later and like crashing their cars and things like that. So I feel like there's been a lot of things on like physical safety that they're trying to kind of fix, but as far as mental health and how those things affect you, like there's not been much done at all.
Yeah, that from an outsider's perspective, that's what it kind of feels like in those industries, where it's like if you're not doing it yourself, if you're not actively seeking talk therapy or another, any form of therapy or any form of self-care, it's not really something that the people in power, I guess you would say, are focused on, right? They're not looking at Alex and saying, hey, I think you might need to talk to somebody because just like you seem off. Where it's more or less like show up, do your job, and if you can't.
What I will say is when you do get on set, because historically there has been nothing for us. Mm-hmm. Your co-stars or your director, if she's a good one, they are a good one. Producers, they'll come up to you and be like, "Hey, was that a lot?" Or you have a lot of one-on-one FaceTime with people who are, the writers or the directors, where it's like, "Hey, there's a car accident scene, and before we shoot it, I want to hear your ideas. I really want to talk to you about what you feel safe doing. Are you okay?" Or you'll shoot it and you're off the next day and they're like, "Hey, was it that? Like, what can we do? You know what? Let's push her scenes for the day till tomorrow." Like within the project, I feel like people are really there, in my experience, really there for each other because they know that there is no one. So it's like, especially if you have a love scene with someone, everybody make sure that consent is all around and no one's triggered and everybody's okay, or things like that from an emotional standpoint. Or you're in the makeup trailer and hair and makeup is like, I saw how that went down. Like, how are you feeling about it? And it's, in my experience, it's almost always like that, where all the people that you're working with will really, really have your back.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like that, the fact that like you can feel that. Hopefully, eventually, as we see things more spoken about, as stigma, hopefully, maybe one day lessens a little bit surrounding mental health, that it'll be more widespread from all aspects, so that it's not just in hair and makeup, and it's not just this, to where it's happening beforehand or even after, because I've read or seen a million interviews of people that are like, yeah, I had this role and it screwed me up for the next year, and I had to go through all this therapy and I had to get through this and I had to do this. And you look at it and some of them, like, then all of a sudden they kind of drop off and you wonder, like, who's taking care? Like, who's worried about that person? And I've often thought that about the music industry, because when I was in my band, there was nobody who cared. Like we had a label that barely wanted to even speak to us. So it was like, when we had issues, we just were in fetal position crying in the back of a van until like I called my mommy and she like brought me back down to earth, as opposed to this person who put me out on the road and made me sign a contract and was like, he didn't care. They didn't care. So hopefully we start to see a little bit more crossover between the two, because I think it's so needed in the world we live in. And what can we do before we have to see the news story about this director did this, or this person did this, or this person went through this on their set, and now they're in a place where they can't work anymore because they just can't do it.
I think it's a good conversation to keep having, because maybe one day there'll be a job where a position will be created for that's actually useful, where it's like, you know, somebody on set that's there to make sure everybody is feeling okay, something like that.
I think that's a wonderful idea. And then like, I feel like, especially when you talk large scale, right? Like how could they not be able to have that available to where if someone needed to go talk to somebody for 15, 20, 30 minutes, I think it would do a heck of a lot more than not having that there.
There might be something like that, and I just don't know. But I mean, as far as I feel like having a good agent and or manager that you can talk to that does care about you, they'll get on the phone real fast and be like, go in your trailer, do not come out until I tell you, and they'll come down there or call or do whatever it is. Like, it's important who you surround yourself that you can control.
Right.
That you feel safe in that scenario. But there are little things. The more people come out and speak about mental health and things like that, the more of a chance we have at fixing these issues before they're issues.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely visibility is so important and in a lot of aspects. But, you know, more people coming out and saying like, I deal with mental health issues. This is how I do it, you know, where people can relate, and it gives other actors, you know, to the strength to say, oh, if so and so can do that, I can do that, and it just trickles to from the top all the way to the bottom to the sides everywhere, and then it also trickles to people who follow those people, right? Like those people find the strength to access mental health help, where they're like, I'm a fan of this person. I can't believe that they have anxiety like I have anxiety. I'm going to go get help now because they're getting help. That I think that does drive, you know, that conversation and helps a lot of people for sure.
Yeah, so you don't feel alone. You always feel alone, even though you know you're not, when you're going through, you know, anything regarding, you know, any kind of mental health problems.
Absolutely. So usually how I like to end all my stuff is sometimes I put people on the spot and with this question. So hopefully I don't put you on the spot. But what is something right now that you would say like you're curious about? Because one of my biggest things as I've gotten older is learn that I need to be curious, because sometimes when I feel hopeless about something or anything really, curiosity helps me to feel hopeful. If I'm curious about this, I can be hopeful. And it's something I teach my own clients too, is to always be curious. So is there anything right now, it could be for you, for your family, that like you're curious about?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think for me, the question that I'm asking myself a lot, that I'm not necessarily walking the walk yet, and I wish I was, is what if it's all fine? Like, what if this is fine? What if there is no problem? What if this doesn't need to be fixed? Like, what if I'm on the right path? Like, what if I behaved like this is all fine? Because looking back on all the things I have ever worried about constantly, I have a lot of anxiety growing up, and I've gotten a handle on it, but I'm always on guard and always alert about like, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? Well, what if I just behaved like it's all fine? Because the truth is, I don't know enough to worry. Like, an asteroid could hit the earth in 10 minutes. Like, I don't know enough to worry about anything. Anything can happen. Like, I'm curious to see who would I be if I just put it away? If I just didn't, what if it was all fine?
Yeah, no, I like that. I always try and follow. And like you said, I don't ever walk the walk, and I have to talk the talk. It's my job. And I always say anxiety is the work of the past and the future, right? If we're able to live in the present with what's in front of us and only worry about the things our two hands can touch right then and there, then that could just be okay. Our what's in front of our eyes can just be okay, and we don't have to worry because we can't fix the past and we can't change the future. It's impossible. It's physically impossible. Like you said, we can't account for the asteroid, and we can't go back and tie up all those loose ends from 15, 20 years ago. All we could do is learn from that past, apply it to the present, and hopefully it helps our future. But I think, what if it is fine? And I think that's a great spot to end. Um, and I thank you for your time, and I really appreciate it. And good luck on all your projects. Good luck with being a great mom. And I will talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me. I had so much fun.
No problem.